Check, check, check. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, February 12th, 2020 Planning Board meeting of the Town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. The board does have a quorum and we'll start with roll call.
Mike D'Arcangelo.
Ed Kranich. Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Bruce Sanford.
Kyle Bancroft.
Kevin Woodbury.
And for today's application, Will Haskell will be working as our town planner. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chair if you are unable to see or hear. The board works from a published agenda, and we will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have the approval of minutes from the November and January meetings, and then a public hearing for the Port Harbor Holdings applications, and then some ordinance workshops. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances or state law. All persons speaking, including a representative of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the microphone, state their name, address, and affiliation with the application, either for, opposed, or neutral. All persons speaking shall address the chairman. Any conversation must be held in abeyance until after the board has formally adjourned. After the board votes on the merits of each application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeal rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regards to a specific application not leave until the board has completed its discussion. Appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the Superior Court or as otherwise provided by law within 45 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual rights to file such an appeal, you must be certain that the board's records evidences your appearance this evening in opposition and the basis of your opposition.
And if I may step in, the reason we asked you to go to the microphone is that this is being broadcast and recorded, and that's the only way it ends up on the recording or getting broadcast. It has nothing to do with hearing in here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. All right, first order of business is the minutes for the November 19th meeting.
Move to accept as printed. Second.
Before the vote, Mary, were we, and I guess this better, or Scott, were we supposed to put a blurb in here that we're using the video as our official?
Yeah, we usually, well, I didn't.
Did I not put it on that one?
I didn't say it. Did I miss it?
No, it may be that I did not put it on that one. I will fix that.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor? Yeah, opposed? No one. Next, the January 20 minutes.
Move to approve the minutes as submitted.
For a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? No one's opposed. Kevin, you? That's the
one I was absent.
Oh, gotcha. So you're one abstention. Okay. Just give me a second. So I'm assuming everybody's here for the public hearing. You're not just here, just kind of, yeah, that's I thought. So our normal board procedure is Will Haskell will introduce the project as to where it stands right now. Then we'll follow that with the applicant, who will then present their side of what is being proposed. The board will ask some general, probably just very general questions to start with, and then we'll open up the public hearing. And then, as Mary said, we would ask that you just proceed to the podium to state your name and address and your affiliation, and then if you could keep your comments, relatively short but to the point, I would appreciate it. And I think that's it. I missed anything? All right. So I think the first order of business we need is it was a sketch plan review from last meeting, so we need a motion deeming the application complete.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Okay. To you, Will.
Okay, thank you. So the application that's before us is the expansion, dock expansion for Jordan Bay Marina. So we received an application There's been some back and forth with the fire department, and then I submitted a technical review memo, and I think there was a recent submission either yesterday or today that was forwarded to the board, but I don't imagine everybody's had a chance to
They
review
have
it.
not. We have not.
I've not distributed it yet.
Okay.
What is your name?
Will Haskell.
Thank you, Will. Thank you.
So, I guess, just to go down and summarize the project, I think with the original application and some of the new information that was submitted, there was a little bit of confusion in terms of the number of new slips and things like that. I think I'll try and summarize what the latest submission says relative to the number of
fine.
slips, because I think the original application was a little bit off there. So, so there's 59 new boats, 59 new boat slips, and 77 existing slips. Wait a minute,
That's St. Pedro's, not yours.
I'm getting myself confused now. So, I thought I had printed off the new version.
I thought you had.
So, yeah, originally they had submitted, it was 126 total slips, but I believe that's been changed to 116 at this point.
What?
Total
Total
slips after the new slips have been added. So these are down off the end of the point. If you're familiar with the site and have driven down into the site, we've got existing boat slips that run down along the access drive there, and then the new slips will be built off the end. There'll be some piles driven for the floats, and then there'll be finger slips built off each side of the docks to provide the new boat slips. Really, I mean, it's all about what's happening in the water. I mean, there's really not a lot of earthwork or anything that's happening on site, on the ground. So they're delineating some parking spaces going down the access drive, and I think that's one of the questions that needs to be considered by the board is. The town ordinance doesn't provide a parking generation rate for marinas. So the applicant and their engineer has submitted some documentation in terms of other kind of published information out there on parking generation rates for marina use. That was one of our questions in our technical review memo, is kind of documenting that number. So I think they've settled on a number of 0.6 spaces per wet slip and 0.2 spaces per dry slip. There's a number of what we call valet spaces here that the boats are stored in a building, and then they're pulled out and launched when the user comes in
And those are the 10 slips?
Nope, there's more than 10 there. Again, this is a number that I think there was some confusion on in the original.
Says 80 on your,
There were a couple different numbers on the original application. It may be best to have
Okay.
them summarize what the total number of dry slips is, so I don't misstate it. So I think that's one question that needs to be resolved is what is the applicable parking generation rate? There really isn't any. We typically go to what's called the Institution of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual for this type of a thing. They do provide some numbers for marina use, but there's like one study that they have pulled those numbers from, so it doesn't have a whole lot of backup behind it.
Okay.
In the most recent submission that the applicant has made, they've provided a number of resources that they've pulled from the internet and other sources that kind of document or provide their justification for the 0.6 for the wet slip and the 0.2 for the dry slip.
Okay.
So, I think, so the parking generation was kind of the key item that we focused in on, especially given that there really isn't any earthwork on the dry land portion of this. So there really isn't any change to stormwater or anything like that. I think another item that came up with Scott's review of prior applications and prior projects here at this site revolved around the septic capacity, and I think,
Yeah,
I don't know if you wanna.
we had talked about, having, it may be a condition of approval that they have, contact the site evaluator to make sure that it matches, that they're compliant with this expansion. It's kind of, there's a little bit of several different permits in there for different things over the years, and it's really hard to decipher exactly what is in the ground there. There was one system back in '86 and possibly a couple holding tanks. And just want to make sure that where they're going to expand, that they become compliant with the subsurface wastewater rules for regarding a marina.
Okay. Are there specific numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there was some back and forth with the fire department in terms of providing adequate fire access down to the end of the driveway, and some discussion back and forth about the fire suppression systems out on the docks, which I don't know if you want to mention anything about that. but-
Yes, from my most recent memo of January 14th, those issues have all been addressed, other than the technical details for approval. For example, the technical details of the standpipe system and the dry hydrant. But the concepts, as far as meeting the fire protection requirements, they have done.
Okay, okay, good.
See here. Did make a comment about ADA accessible parking spaces, which I believe they've addressed in the in the most recent submission, which you haven't reviewed yet, but I think that's been accommodated. Again, the technical memo kind of goes down through the various site plan review standards, the shoreline zone standards. And again, given that there really isn't any earthwork on the site,
So there's
I mean,
nothing really
it's
applicable, right?
really kind of all about the parking as
Yep.
far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So,
All right.
that's really all I had to say about it at this point.
Okay, thanks, Will. Is the applicant?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Rob McSorley with Sebago Technics here. We're representing Port Harbor Marine, who is doing the expansion or proposing their expansion at the Jordan Bay Marina here in town. We were before you with a sketch plan. The plan that you see is remarkably the same as that, with more detail. We have had the benefit of going and working through a lot of the comments already. They were pretty straightforward. We had some clarification and stuff relative to fire, but I think we got all those worked out. Relative to the project, they are proposing an additional 49 slips, 49 net slips. They have 67 wet slips right now that are for lease and use. There are 10 slips that are there just for the valet service. They're not used for any boats to be parked at. Only when people come and want to take them out, those are used. So with the 67 leased or used slips, 10 of those will be taken away as part of the expansion at the end. We'll be adding 59, which means a net more of 49. So we'll have 116 that will be leased or used, and then we have the other 10 slips, which are the valet slips. So sorry for the confusion on that and whatnot. Relative to the number of dry slips, there is a building there that, there's a note on there that indicates that there are 80 dry slips there. In the calculation, we used 100 dry slips. The reason is, in the main building up front, there is some capability for storage under that. So we took into account the potential for additional storage in the front building. That's why you see 80 labeled on the plan for the one boat storage building, but the calculation is based on 100. So we wanted to be as accurate as we could. As Will had mentioned, IT manual, parking generation manual, has one study for this, not all that conclusive. So what we did is we did some research, and there's not a lot out there. The biggest one in publication in the United States is California, and a lot of other states refer back to that. There's some other foreign ones also. We mentioned in our notes back that the Australian standards, which pretty much mirror what the standards from California, and which are being used within the United States, and that's 0.6 per wet slip, 0.2 to 0.4 on a dry slip. They have a half a space for marina employee. What we did relative to that, we used the higher end for the wet slip. Based upon our experience with this facility and other facilities that Port Harbor Marine manages, the 0.2 to 0.4, we used the lower end. We used the 0.2. We'll be totally honest with you, because that's what's more applicative of what occurs here. Relative to the number of employees, we didn't use the rate that we found online. We used the town rate, which was a little higher, which was 1.2. That all being said, with that calculation done out, I think we have about 10 extra spaces as it is laid out right now. But one of the things we did is, when we looked at spaces, we didn't consider 9-foot spaces. Because it's gravel, we considered 10-foot spaces, because nobody's going to be parking between lines and whatnot. So we were trying to be a little bit more conservative in that nature and whatnot. We have addressed the ADA standards. We do have 2 or 3 ramps where we have access over to the one dock, which we have fire access there. Seems an excellent position to put handicap spaces on either side of that fire access, and that works as their set down area that's in a handicap ramp. Relative to other permitting, we are in the process with MDEP. We got one set of comments from them that were pretty minor. We've responded to those. They, of course, send out our documents to several other agencies, and we have been answering questions, minor questions from IF&W and the Maine Department of Agricultural Conservation and Forestry. They are the ones who are responsible for submerged land leases. We actually contacted them up front of this project to find out what the requirements would be. This does not require a submerged land lease because of the depth of the furthest dock doesn't exceed 10.5 feet from the control elevation. There's an elevation that they set based upon the natural elevation of Sebago Lake is where the submerged land lease starts from, and we don't meet that. We also we confirmed that on the phone just 2 weeks ago, because they wanted to call back and make sure that was the case, and so we talked to them, and so they have reviewed the plan on this. Also, as part of the submissions, we have gone to the Maine Historical Preservation Commission and IFW, and there have been no concerns from both of those agencies relative to the project. We believe MDEP's in the final process of getting their permit together, and we expect them to issue relatively shortly. Relative to the septic system, Scott and I talked about it on the phone this morning. He had alerted us to that, and we've done a little digging on our own, trying to understand what is there and what was permitted and whatnot. Not all the records are available on that. What we believe, based upon the letter that Scott had mentioned to me this morning, that there was a restriction for 19 slips, and we believe those were based on slips that would be overnight slips. Hence, the installation of a shower and bathroom facility there. This marina doesn't act as that type of marina. It's a day marina. There is no boats that have been staying with people who stay overnight. In fact, we don't have a very high usage and flow, we believe, going to the septic system right now. And we're trying to quantify that based upon looking at Portland Water District records, separating those water out and whatnot. We know that we've only pumped the two 1,000 gallon septic tanks once in 4 years. So we know there's not getting a lot of use. What we propose is that going forward, there would be a condition of approval, and we work with the CEO to monitor and understand what flows are going to that and make the appropriate modifications if there's a deficiency in the system. So with that, we have found everything to pretty straightforward. What I'd like to do is go up there and just turn that map around, because it really concentrates on the main plan, if I could. You probably see better there that the existing dock kind of wraps around the point, and there are fingers that go off from that dock. Those fingers that extend outward towards the lake will be taken off, and then we're proposing the two main dock extensions with the burris or slips off from that. I've kind of highlighted there the extension of the property lines for the property. That kind of defines what's the Division of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry look at when they look at the submerged land lease. They're looking at what your littoral area is in front of your project, and then from that, those sidelines that you create, you need to be at least 25 feet in from that with any structure. So you can see we've put a dashed line in from those sidelines to indicate where that 25-foot setback is. We're about 30 to 35 feet off that sideline that the Division of Agricultural, Conservation, and Forestry define as part of the submerged land lease rules. And of course, they would be applicable to our neighbors to the north and to the south. Any structure they put, they would have to be at least 25 feet away also. So with that, I will be more than happy to answer any questions. I think Will did a very good job, and I think we move
Okay.
forward.
Since you're standing, Rob, we have to keep it this way because the camera shines and it's being recorded. But I think, would you mind just spinning that at least for a little bit so the audience could, they have no way, they can't see it. I see the map in the back.
Do you want me to turn?
Yeah, would you please? And then I know it's going to go up the air, but at least everyone get a better, yeah. Well, yeah, let's not block.
You're allowed to head out.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any specific questions?
I got a quick question.
Go ahead, Paul.
On the dry dock or the dry slips that you're talking about, you'd assigned a lower generation rate to those, and I'd like to know why, because it seems that that would generate more traffic, where people are coming in, they're dropping the boat, and then you can have you know, I don't know what the marina does for business in there, but I can assume that that one slip could have, you know, 5, 6, 8, 10 boats a day dropped in there. And those 10 slips, you know, multiply that, seems like there should be a higher generation rate for that, because it's not just one boat occupying those 10 spots.
We looked at the whole scope of what the parking needed to be. Of course, the town ordinance doesn't specifically address marina, so we went out there to find the best information we could. And also with that, we relied on our client relative to what our experience is at other marine facilities. And what we did was we tried to be a little bit conservative too. And that's why when I say, you know, we went and we looked at 10-foot spaces versus 9-foot spaces. You know, we could cram more cars in there, yeah, but, you know, be a little bit more conservative. And relative to the difference that you would see from point 2 to point 4, it's 20 cars, and right now we have it extra 10 spaces. So with that, and with the fact that we're doing bigger spaces, and that we used a larger or a higher generation rate, not generation rate, but a parking space rate for the employees versus what they told us in the marina type standards, we doubled that. We thought we were being very conservative relative to the amount of parking provided.
Do you guys have any idea what your internal numbers are? I mean, you guys are, the marina's been running for quite a few years. Do you have any idea what kind of use in the high season each one of those slips would get? Because I know that they've been doing it for a long time. It's super convenient. That's why it's been great down there. You come in, you drop your boat, but how many people are gonna have their boat dropped in that same slip? And how many cars are gonna, do you have any idea, or is there any kind of study internally done to see what kind of numbers you guys are servicing currently with those 10 slips?
We did not look at that, no, we didn't, so, but
Same thing, are these generation rates based on peaks or averages?
those are what they consider their worst condition.
So that's
The peak.
That's a peak generation. rate.
That's your, what's the big boating day? July 4th. That's what they mentioned in the
So
stuff.
assuming that you hit the peak or whatever and and exceeds that, is there a overflow plan where people could park? Because that's what the condition, you know, that we worry about. Obviously, if it's filled, where are they gonna go? Are they gonna go try to park on 302? They're gonna park in people's driveways? Or are they gonna park maybe across the street in your lot over there? Or is there a plan for that?
Well, typically, when we look at parking, of course, we look at a required rate, and the way we are in this day and age, very conscious that we don't put more parking in than necessary. You know, what is the magical number? You know, that's why, because of the fact that IT's parking generation study doesn't have enough information, that's why we went out and looked and got, you know, what we thought would be the best. And then, once again, being conservative on the size of the parking space that we consider, and try to be under on what we need versus what's required, so that we do have a little extra.
But even then, I would think there would be an overflow plan just in case, because that's when the accidents occur and people get hurt or whatever.
Congestion for the
And
fire
congestion for the fire department.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a plan that's saying, okay, if we exceed there, then we start parking people across the street or something.
Well, I guess the ordinance doesn't speak to that type of plan, so that's not really been considered. You know, we can look at other areas on the site, of course, for additional parking and whatnot. But
I guess
We-
another question I have, why are we using this source that has one study instead of having you guys look internally at what you're doing on those 10 docks specifically? Why would we, you know, we're looking at this and we're saying, hey, this has only been one study. You guys have been down there a number of years. You should have a general idea of who uses those 10 spaces on a continuous basis. And we're not seeing any of that. And that red flag for me.
Okay.
So,
two things. One, we didn't use the one study. The one study is the reason why we went out and looking for other information.
okay.
So we didn't use one study. We used stuff that came out of California, an organization out of Florida who deals with marinas, the Australian government, relative to what they do for marinas.
It just seems like
So-
it would be relatively easy to pull your internal numbers and get a judge of what you guys are doing rather than comparing it to whether it be this, and that. I mean, you guys have been in business long enough where I would assume that you would know what kind of action those 10 spaces produce in the busy season.
And if I brought that argument before most boards, they would say, prove it. So we usually don't use our own information unless we have something that we can back it up, concrete, like water records. But we don't have parking records for the site. We have a general feel. So with that, we need to go by what is published and what is out there and what you can rely on to approve our project. If that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm not gonna, I don't agree with that. I think that we could look at this and come up with a site-specific idea on what we're looking at. But that's my opinion, and you answered the question, so thank you.
Yes.
I think the point's well taken, though, that a company that's been in business that generates revenue from movement of boats in and out of boat slips must have billing records that tell what boat went in and out of what slip and what they charged. Otherwise, they'd have no way to track their revenue. So there must be a way, if they wanted to dig into those records and come up with some kind of a better idea of actual traffic generation based upon revenue and movement in and out of boat slips over time.
We may have some records on what, Mike Susi, Port Harbor Marine, we may have some records on what we've put in and put out, but that, we don't have records on if they stayed there. So lots of these boats get put in, someone gets dropped off, they take it to their camp, or they take it somewhere out to Fry Island, and then the car goes away. So we wouldn't know if there's a car still parked there.
They don't report into you when they come in and out of the slip on a
They
daily
do,
or
but they don't
weekly
tell me I'm
basis or
parking
whatever.
here.
They just use the slip and they rent it and they leave their boat and they might
That's
take
right.
it somewhere for
I
a
mean, a
week
ton
and
of
come
these
back and leave
people
it for a week.
may take their boats and take their car. We don't have record of that. You know, in my experience, there's more than enough parking, because compared to my other marinas, but, you know, I gotta go by the ordinance or whatever he says, you know. If you say, do it on your experience, I look at a webcam up there on 4th of July, and I'm like, where is everybody? And then I look at my webcam in South Portland, and it's packed. You know, you can't find a parking spot. That's,
That's apples and oranges.
I understand, that's my
Wait,
experience.
we can't have a discussion. Thanks.
I do have some questions and comments since we're getting into some technical stuff here.
Why don't we hold the technical
You wanna
questions?
hold that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got one more thing on your point. The valet, it just gets used a lot less, because they gotta rely on us putting the boat in the water. If you own a slip, you can, you know, go there at 6 o'clock in the morning, get your boat. They get used a lot more. That's why that rating is lower. They don't get used nearly as much as when you have a wet slip.
If there's no real urgent question, I think I'd like to open the public hearing, and then we'll come back to the board questions.
If I could
on the
just ask
details.
one quick question
Sure.
regarding the slips and the boats, et cetera. Would it, is there some sort of, I'm just concerned a little bit about septic, so would it, is it the marinas policy that they wouldn't allow anyone to stay there overnight in a boat?
They can stay overnight, it's just, there's not many boats that you can stay overnight on. I mean, these are 25-foot slips, so they're gonna be bow riders and pontoon boats. At the beginning, and that's where I think the 19 boats came from, there's some bigger 28-foot slips. But, I mean, I probably, once again, like down in South Portland, I have people that stay all summer. There, most people get there, you know, at 10 o'clock, and they go out boating for 5-6 hours, they come back and they leave. I might have 2 or 3, he said no boats, but there might be a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 people that spend the night there, I don't know. Not many though, because the boats just, they're too small to comfortably stay the night.
Thanks.
look like you want to say something.
I just, a couple things to consider, I guess, relative to parking. Generally, business owners want to have enough parking or more parking than what's reasonable usually, because they like to have the people come in and use the spaces. So, you know, the comment about the overflow, I mean, it's a valid comment, I guess, but to me, it's something that if there becomes an issue out there, I mean, I think there could be something worded into the approval or similar to the septic in terms of monitor it, and if you start seeing people that are parking out on Route 302 or parking in other people's driveways, I mean, then all of a sudden it's like, time out, something's gotta change here, and we gotta figure out what is the real parking rate. Another option, which I guess I'm not really recommending at this point, I mean, given the research that they've done, I mean, with the other parking spaces, and yes, they could go to the higher rate on the valet slip, but, you know, it is possible to do like a parking study on something like this, but it's not possible to do it right now because it's not, you know, it's not in use. So that would push that way off into, you know, the summer season when people are using the boat slips out there. I think in general, though, I mean, my thought is that, you know, they want enough parking spaces there for their customers, because if customers can't park, then they're not going to rent a boat slip from them. Usually, is the case. So, I guess just a couple things to consider in your thoughts relative to parking. So,
Okay, thank you, Will. Okay, we have a bunch of probably lots of little technical questions yet to go, but I'd like to just kind of open the public hearing now. So that if you would like, remember you need to speak from the podium. You need to state your name and your address, and if you and I guess that's it. And then your comments. Would anyone like to go first?
I don't mind.
You're up.
All right, I'll try to be brief here and not take up too much time. My name's David Bernard. I reside at 71 Indian Point Road. And on that map there, what you can't see is what's around it. You see these docks, these extra long docks going out into the water. If you're looking at that map, to the left of those docks, there's a row of rocks. They've been there forever. It's a little sandbar with a row of rocks, and like a lot of wildlife, ducks, Canadian geese, they lay eggs there. It's a beautiful place to take a kayak out to and swim. Where I live is perfectly east of where the docks will be. So my direct view into the water will be those docks now. Every day, what I do is I get up, I kayak out to the rocks, and I swim. And, you know, I'm disabled, and my doctor has said swimming is really, really good for me. With these docks here, that is the area that I swim in. I will literally be swimming into their boats, where this is set up to go right now. What you can't see also is they're right up against those rocks. Beyond those rocks is an entire protected species area. We can't do anything. We can't cut a tree. We can't do anything at all. They're looking at dumping another 20 plus boats right there. Now, something that has been brought up, if you look at where their docks begin, there's a long dock that the two fingers come off. That was actually added either 2 years ago or last year. We, of course, at Indian Point didn't know anything about it. Our beach is right there. Where those docks end 35 feet away is a beach that's been used since the 1960s. That beach is virtually unusable now due to fuel spill from the boats, the rental boats that are parked there currently. I didn't hear anyone speak about the new rental program that they have over there, where folks pay a fee, I believe is it $4,000 or $5,000 a season, to be able to use, is it 10 boats that you have available or more? 5 boats. Those 5 boats are parked right there at the edge of the beach. I've personally witnessed over and over and over again, and had full intent of going and speaking with Port Harbor this spring. They have young fellas that work there, and what they do is they fuel the boats after people use them during the day. The rental folks, they use the boat, it gets fueled, then they valet that boat over to this dock. Well, there's a good amount of spillage that takes place because they're topping the boats off, and there just is. Then what happens is they have a no-wake zone that leads out to about where you see the end of those docks. These young folks drive very, very fast out to the end, spin the boat around, and then drive very, very fast into the docks. And when they get to the docks, they throw it into reverse to stop it, and then they park it. They're very efficient at their job. The problem is I've been out there swimming and almost been hit, because the area where you swim, where those docks will now be, is exactly where they've been going to get to those 5 spots. Now, I mean, that won't be as much of a safety issue there, but there's a whole new safety issue that's now going to happen. With these docks being there, you can't see it, but about 100 feet beyond those docks is the entrance to the Panther Run River, where Panther Marina is on one side, and on the other side, Indian Point Campground. Many boats come up and down that river, but as far as I know, nobody's asked to add any slips over on Panther Run side. We haven't asked to add any slips. It would become a safety issue if we asked, we'd like to add 15 more slips. That would add more boats in the river and create a safety issue. What's going to happen here, and you're going to be dealing with this after the fact, all these boats coming in and all of these boats trying to park, just a big collision of boats all taking place within 100 to 200 feet of each other. And also, if this continues with the rental program, where people are racing out of a no-wake zone, you know, again, no-wake zone, they all converge right exactly at the same place just beyond these docks. That's that part. The environmental part, you're talking about adding boats, and it's natural. You go out for a day of boating. You pull in, you fuel the boat, you go out, you park your boat. If there's overage, where it went over a little bit, just a little bit, enough to get into the water, you go and you park it, it continues to drip into the water. Now you have all these other boats that are dripping fuel. The way that the current runs, it runs into Indian Point, the Indian Point area and the conservation area. That's going to be a good amount of fuel. I have no idea how they got this past the DEP. Every one of us here from Indian Point, we have had no idea until just recently that this was happening. It wasn't presented to us, wasn't presented to anyone. We had no chance to speak to the DEP about it. We will be speaking to the DEP about it, but we haven't really had a chance to do that. And that's really, that's all I have to say. Tried to be as quick as I could, but this is a big deal. This is a massive impact on the environment of that area. Traffic-wise, I'm hearing that there won't be an issue with traffic and boats in and out of there. If anyone who lives around here has seen the backup from Route 85 on 302 straight back to Jordan Bay Marina, currently you have people with boats trying to get out of there at the busiest time of the day when people are also coming from Raymond Beach. It's quite a traffic situation. I mean, I've personally seen people who, when they were full, have just parked on 302 with their truck and boat. I got to admit, it doesn't happen very much, but it's happened. Add all these other cars, show us some video peak time where there's all these extra parking spots to accommodate that. If they come up with the idea of, let's take all the boats we have for sale that are across the street on 302 by Mosquitoes and let people park there, now you're looking at people walking back and forth across Route 302. Somebody's going to get hit. I can't find any way that this project can go through and not have it be a disaster one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Allison Allen. I live in Cumberland Center and at Indian Point Campground. I just found out about this yesterday. I've been at Indian Point Campground for 30 years. I'm not much of a public speaker, but I was an original Hull Flyers person when the campground went from being a transient campground to being a condo campground. I was part of that group. When we did the project in the late 80s, we tried to put slips over, well, it would be on Indian Point property, it wouldn't be over on Marina property. And we were told, and we were not allowed to do that because of environmental
Excuse me one second.
impact.
You can spin it if you want to get it back on the camera. Again, you're okay? Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We were not allowed to do that because of environmental impact. We were not allowed to even put the road, which you still have on that map that never existed, because we weren't allowed to put the road that went over close to the loon preserve. Too much environmental impact. The loons, the frogs, whatever. So we had to just put our slips on Panther Run. Well, that was fine, and we have our beach. What you can't see from that is our cove has a small beach area, and it's right there by those docks. Now, when we went to the town back in the late 80s, Jack Cooper was the code enforcement officer. And we went to meetings every month for a year and to get all of this straightened away with DEP, EPA, the Bugs and Bunnies of the world, I don't know. But Jack Cooper had that all written, and he had the tapes on it. This was 30 years ago. I don't have that. I wasn't a secretary or anything. I was just a grunt moving rocks and planting grass. But at one point, Jack Cooper had some sort of problem with his job or something that he had done to fall out of favor. And that's another whole story. But right during that time frame, all of those records on Hull Flyers, all of the written records and all of the tapes were lost, so that no one could prove whatever it was that Jack Cooper had done. Maybe hearsay, but I was there through the, for all of this. So, but my biggest problem is this isn't my first rodeo, and I've talked to people for the last 30 years. Oh yeah, I just dump my tanks wherever I want. Dump the poop in the lair, the fish will eat it. Well, you know what people are like, and they're going to do what they're going to do. People don't follow rules. There's not enough pump out stations in the area. People are throwing garbage. That aside, that is visually right by our beach. We've been at this beach for the last 30 years. Go down, watch the sunset, have our kids play in the water, people with a couple of kayaks. We got a world-class swimmer here who's in the water all the time. And it's going to destroy that. For what? So, I know that the whole Jack Cooper story and all of that holds no weight. So all I can say is that it's going to devalue all of our properties at Indian Point to a huge amount, because we no longer can. We had another little beach over on Panther Run, and because people weren't keeping up with it, it's now overgrown, can't be used. Nobody really used it there anyway, except for bring their dog down a little bit and let the kids dig in the sand. Because why? Because there's boat slips, oil, gas, God only knows what else in the water over there, to say nothing of milfoil now. But anyway, so I guess my main concern is visual and environmental and quality of life. And it's not all about the almighty dollar. And I understand about boats, My husband, rest his soul, always had sailboats, and I've sailed on this lake my whole life. So I'm not against boats, I'm just against this project, because I have never seen somebody want to build a project right in front of someone's beach like that. So, I guess
Thank you.
that's all.
Allison Sarna. I'm at 13 Flying Hulls Way over at Indian Point, property owner. Also echoing what people have mentioned about this not showing the full space, and that cove that we have on the other side that comes off of Panther Run. This effectively creates a tighter basin in that space, so affecting, water flow through that space, which already will create greater erosion on the beach, which we've noticed over the last year this project was put in. And also, this plan doesn't show anything about channel markers. So right now, there's one set of channel markers which would flow directly out of that channel, but what do people do for the opposite side that they'll be encroaching across our swimming area? And I have a slew of other environmental issues, but I think they've already been addressed by the people.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, sir.
Alan Doherty, 19 Boaters Way, Indian Point. I'm totally against this. I've been at Indian Point for 22 years, going on 23 years, and we've always had our beach down there. That beach has been there for a long time. Okay, when they put the walkway in last summer, or the summer before, I should say, I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. And I was wondering why the town never notified any of us about what was going on when that catwalk was put in down there at that point, and why the town didn't notify us, 52 families, of what's been going on with this being in. This isn't just started yesterday. This has been going on for a couple of years now, if not longer. And we have no idea. We had no idea about it.
The project just started. This project just came to the board 1 month ago.
Okay, well, we've had no one has told us anything about it.
Well, you're here, so you must have been told.
Well, I got told yesterday.
Well,
I never got a letter in the mail from the town. We're abutters to, Loon Echo Preserve is between Indian Point.
1 second. Indian Point, did we send out,
I sent what was run for me, is everybody within 300 feet of the project. I'll have to check with Kayla if there was some mistake. But that's what-
Look, can I explain something? Indian Point, the people own their lots, the people own their parking driveways, but the rest of the grounds is common area. We all own it. We all own that land.
What did happen was that we were not updated on the mailing address for the general
Individual.
property. It was sent to somebody who is long gone, and we were not informed of that, so supposedly we will be given a new address, which is a post office box,
Yep,
but I don't know if we've seen that yet.
okay. Okay.
So anyways, to get back to the situation, I was wondering if the planning board has done a site walk to go down there and actually walk around down there.
We are all familiar with that area. We've
You're
discussed
familiar
that.
with it, but have you all been down there and seen how close that's gonna be? That docking system's to the left, how close it's gonna be to the Loon Echo Preserve? You know, and like, this young man said right here about the gasoline in the water, and when they back out those boats, they're 25, 30 feet from our beach. You know, there's children playing, there's children in the water.
We've got that, Alan. If you
I
have
know, but
something new to-
it's a health safety issue.
Yes, sir. And if you have something new to add, we would love to hear it, but
Okay.
if it's just going to be the same thing over again, it doesn't really help us at this point.
How much of a buffer do they have to have between those docks, or that dock right there, and the Loon Echo Preserve? How much of an easement do they have to have?
Between
The
where?
Loon Echo Preserve
Right, the wetland
and,
space?
and the wetlands, that's called Loon Echo Preserve.
So you're asking how much buffer is required from their property to the next property?
Absolutely,
Could be
I
about
am.
30 I would think around 30 feet, right? Unless it's water. Are we talking about water?
That's what they're talking about,
Yeah.
water, which.
So there is no buffer.
There is no
on-
buffer to that preserve?
No.
I don't understand that one.
Well,
Now, we'll get to the DEP. We'll do the DEP. We'll go with the DEP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
is there some additional?
My name is Barry McKay.
I'm sorry, Barry?
Barry McKay.
Barry.
And I live on 22 Indian Point, which is on the outside of the campground, and I also own inside the campground number 29 Indian Point. I just want to go on record that I am opposed to the project for a number of reasons.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I'll be very brief.
All right,
Safety,
yep,
but my number one is obstructed view. You've already heard it, but obstructed view, it's horrible. Diminished property value, and that's it. Thank you.
Just a point of interest. If you would
you
go
have to go back up there, I'm sorry.
Okay. Allison Allen again. There's 50 of us who pay taxes to the town, so you know who we are, and you have our addresses. So notify us.
Is there anybody else that has some different, yes, sir?
Hi, William Groves. I'm in 15 Allens Way in Indian Point. The only thing they talked about around the beach and stuff like that, we do have a roped off area for the swim area. We've had for years. It's always been roped off. We have a float. And what I'm concerned about is the boats backing in from the docks near the beach, backing in, either coming in or backing up and cutting our rope. You know, seeing that our beach ropes are near there. Also, that lake gets really rough, and those slips are out in the rough area, and people coming in with boats. Now, there's people that come in sober, and people come in drunk as, really drunk. And coming into those docks when it's rough is tough when you're sober. So, I mean, we have our beach right there, and the people use that beach. It's not an unused beach. So that's all I wanted to say for that part of it.
Thank you, William. Anybody
Can I
else?
speak for just a brief moment, sir?
Yep, go ahead, David.
Minute and a half.
All right, you got it.
Okay.
90 seconds, I'm counting.
90 seconds. Just two things that were brought up
All
about
right.
these particular boat slips, and then they're 25 and below. So it was said that the chances of people sleeping overnight on those boats are very slim. That's inaccurate. There are plenty of boat styles out there that are cuddy cabin that you can sleep on the boat at night, which will increase the sewage, of course, when they're using the bathrooms in the facility. Secondly, a 25-foot boat, many of those have bathrooms, on the boat. Those do need to be disposed of. I'm unfamiliar with the current process, at Jordan Bay of how they get that from the boat someplace else. But you add another 25 boats, that's 25 boats more waste, and, that's an issue. I don't know what the next step is with this process, if you vote at the next meeting or how this works. I just ask that as a community, we have the opportunity to get with the DEP and do a site walk with the DEP and let the DEP measure these type things. When he speaks of the loon conservation land, the loon conservation land begins where those rocks are. And those rocks are going to be probably 20 feet from where people are pulling a boat up and then backing a boat in. And I don't know, maybe, I'm guessing 300 to 400 feet from the marshland where all of these nesting birds are putting their eggs down. And I mean, that's why we can't drive a motorboat in that area, because of we can't do anything. We can't put docks, we can't do, anything at all. And of course, we will provide you with an updated address to Indian Point. And A question for Jordan Bay. Is it a policy at Jordan Bay that you are not allowed to take your own gas can and fuel your dock, fuel your boat on your docks? Is that a policy?
Well, you
Is
have
that
to-
a policy? The question you can't answer.
I know,
Fort
we
Harbor.
don't have side discussions back and forth.
Yes, sir.
So we will get that answer for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My name is Rachel Sarna. I live at, I camp at 13 Flying Hulls Way. I've been there for 30 years. As someone mentioned earlier, I swim that beach almost every day that I'm at camp. I've noticed a considerable environmental concerns, you know, with lack of fish, turtles, you know, in that area. And also I snorkel. I've picked up empty beer cans, broken glass that have been left on our beach, especially, you know, in the spring, and it has increased over time. I'm really concerned about the water quality for my grandchildren in the future. I've been coming to Sebago Lake since I was 11 and 12 years old. And I went to a symposium at St. Joe's College talking about the water quality at Sebago Lake. And I'm not sure if anyone here is aware that it's the cleanest lake in the state of Maine. How can we keep it that way? And we have a list of other questions that we'd like to leave with the town of Raymond to have answers for us in the future. I did receive a postcard in the mail, and I'm part of the reason why all these people are here tonight. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thank you for getting them here. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, I am going to close the public hearing for right now. So to be honest with you, I'm a little, we're in uncharted area here. I understand all of your concerns, and I'm sure every member of the board here is sympathetic to the safety, the environmental impact, the safety impact, the visual, which may be something we could do. But we, as a board, must make decisions based upon our ordinances, and those ordinances approved by you guys. And we do not have really a marina ordinance, as Will kind of talked about. So what Will was basically saying is what the project for us, which has come down to, is really parking, which is the only thing that we have in our ordinances that we can use to make a decision on. I will open it back up again for you. But so as of right now, you've asked how we are going to proceed. I don't know. There's mention in the ordinance on a visual impact, but that's for house construction. I don't know if we can apply it. There is impact certainly on environmental, but again, it's not for this type of structure. Anybody want to throw in some help?
Well, yeah, I do have some comments. The thing we struggle with as a board is how do we balance the right of a landowner to develop his property within the limits of what's allowed by the ordinances, whether some of the activity passes the smell test or not, and how do we balance that versus legitimate concerns of people who live in the area. From what I've heard here, it has raised some issues in my mind about the context that we've been given in looking at the surrounding area that's not shown versus what is shown on the plan. When I look at Will's review letter back on the next to last page above staff recommendations and actions, there's a paragraph that says the planning board shall also review the following submission standards as identified in section 16D of the shoreland zoning provisions. 1, will maintain safe and healthful conditions. 2, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters. 3, will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater. 4, will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, birds, or other wildlife habitat. 5, will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland waters. From what I've heard from people who live in the area, there certainly seems to be an open question as to whether we can adequately state that all of those first 5 items are actually going to be met. And it seems to me that we would be derelict in the planning board if we didn't consider the context of the footprint of this plan with the surrounding, where Panther Pond Inlet stream is, where the Indian Point Campground is, the adjacent beach area. If we don't have parking standards, it seems very difficult to me to approve a project that if it turns out the parking is inadequate, we then have to go back in after the fact and try to arm wrestle the owner to do something that's going to meet a better standard. Even if it means putting the project off for a year, it would seem to me that it would be a better course of action to actually have a seasonal traffic study so that we know what the impact is going to be before we approve the project. I can't speak for the board. That's just what my thinking is evolving in. As far as the actual plans go, I do have a couple of points. Both Will and the applicant state in their submitted paperwork that there's not going to be any disturbance of vegetation or cutting of trees or excavation work, and yet the plan clearly shows about a 150-foot length of HDPE pipe that's going to be put in to join the standpipes together from one area of the dock to the new area of the dock. That pipe runs right through an area that is outlined as being vegetated. First question, is that mature tree cover? Is it knee-high scrub growth? What are we cutting through here for that 150-foot trench?
Those are trees with scrub growth underneath, and what it would be due, and it's been said that they will locate that line to minimize disturbance. It will be cleared back in or filled back in, and it will be reverted
So
back
it's just scrub right now?
Correct. We're
Okay,
not
the
taking
question
any-
I have for Will, there are erosion and sedimentation details on the detail sheet in the plans. There are no erosion and sedimentation controls shown around the perimeter of this trench. Are we saying that the scrub growth by itself is going to be adequate as it stands for excavation of 150 feet with stockpiling of excavated earth? I assume the pipe is going to have to go to frost depth. So 150-foot trench, 4 feet deep, plus the height of the pipe and the bedding, that's going to be a significant amount of area of earth that's going to be stockpiled and it has to set somewhere.
So first of all, that trench wasn't shown on the original submission.
Okay.
That is on the newer plans.
Right.
So I did not comment on that.
Okay,
in
so
my
you
original
will
technical
have to
memo.
comment on that. Yep.
At least based on the original plans that I have in front of me.
Oh, you printed them? Did you print them? Did you print the new plans?
That's just what I got in the
envelope?
mailed to me. There's 150-foot trench right here on sheet 2 of 6. It's shown. So it seems to me that if we either need to ascertain that no erosion and sedimentation control is required for that trench, or if it is, it needs to be shown on the plan as to what is required for erosion and sedimentation control.
Absolutely. That, again, it wasn't on the original plan set that I reviewed, so
Okay.
I see that now on, and again, I know there are different plans.
I'll just bring it up, okay, since
Yep.
a point. There's no cross-section of the trench. It shows the bedding of the pipe, the warning tape at the top, all that. I think we're certainly gonna need that.
Yep.
I believe you mentioned there were gonna be a couple of 3 ADA ramps down somewhere from the
They're
parking
ADA
to the-
parking.
Pardon?
We are providing ADA parking.
Well, I know you're providing ADA parking. I thought you said there were also gonna be a couple of ADA ramps.
No,
Maybe I
no, the
misunderstood.
ramps are existing.
Pardon?
The ramps are existing. We are
Okay.
providing ADA parking.
They're not shown on the plan.
The ADA parking? It's on the revised set, based upon the comments from Will.
Shouldn't they be shown in relation to the ADA parking locations?
What?
You said you had some ADA ramps that exist.
I did not say that. I said there's some ramps that are down to the dock, and that's where we put the ADA spaces, adjacent to those ramps.
So they're directly abutting them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, Scott, are you comfortable with making that an in-house CEO review as far as the placement of the ramps relative to the parking spaces and that they're properly laid out and the slopes are right and all that? We don't need to get into that on the planning board.
No, that'd be something that we would look at on site to make sure that it meets.
And just a general question I have is, what happens if the pile driver hits ledge in the bottom of the lake before he gets down to adequate pile depth? If he can't sink the pile through the ledge, then that ruins the layout unless they get out there with the pile driving on a marine collar or a pile driving boat out there, which completely upsets the apple cart of what we're dealing with here for pile installation. So that's an open question. What happens if that happens?
I don't know, sir, but based upon our experience in the piles that we put in to date, moorings, we put in moorings versus piles.
But we have no borings or any information of what's down there at the bottom of the lake. It's just based on what happened 50 or 100 feet away in a different part of the lake.
Well,
do we need any exploration of
We can
a marine
install it with
boring down into the
moorings.
seabed there?
No, we wouldn't have to drive anything. We'd just drop granite blocks or, you know, a lot of marinas are held with just moorings, not piles. You wouldn't need to drive anything. Moorings and chain.
Do we need any information as far as the planning board goes with such an alternative layout or alternative construction method, or is that a CEO determination?
That's submerged, that's not even my jurisdiction because it's underwater. My jurisdiction ends at the shoreline.
So that would just be a DEP question.
How does the planning
I
board
think.
wrestle with that one?
That would be a DEP question.
Yeah, I guess.
Well,
Can the applicant or the engineer explain what type of DEP permits you're getting on this project?
Yeah. As part of this submittal, we're getting an individual NERPA or Natural Resource Protection Action permit. Because we're in the Great Pond of Sebago Lake, this, in the nature of the project we have, it's a full permit. There's not a tier 1, tier 2. If you're familiar with the lesser permits that the DEP deals with. As part of this, they are reviewing the impacts for the docks relative to the environment, wetlands, including both the lake and adjacent wetlands. As part of our project, we have mapped the edge of the wetlands around the project, which include into that preserve or adjacent to that preserve, and they're looking at all that. In addition, they go and submit out to the different agencies of the state, including IF&W, who look at it for fisheries and for endangered species, plants and animals. So it's a little bit more comprehensive than, you know, just being thrown out there. So
What is the permitting process? Where does it stand right now?
we're waiting for permit issuance. We've got one set of comments. We replied to those. I believe DEP was still waiting for response from a couple of the state agencies. The ones that we know about, IF&W, have responded back. They have no problem. The Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, relative submerged land lease and whatnot, they have no problem. So We're just waiting for a permit to be issued.
Does the planning board have any jurisdiction over the DE as far as review of DE permitting process out on the water? Do we have a right to review their report and question it, or if they issue a permit and say it's okay, that we have nothing to say about it?
So typically, when one of those permits gets submitted by an applicant, there should be a copy that got submitted to the town. That's available for public review, but there really isn't any jurisdiction that I'm aware of that the planning board has to go in and make comment on that.
Does the public have a right to review the DEP report before the permitting process?
So typically, the public has a right to comment on the application, the DEP application. There's a certain procedure.
They have to attend a hearing or
Typically,
whatever?
they get notified, so there would be, again, a notification, a butter notification process. That's part of that DEP submission. And then, as part of that notification, there's a standard form or standard letter that gets submitted with that fact sheet that basically describes what the rights are of the abutter to make comments, request a public hearing. The public hearing isn't something that happens automatically, but it can be requested usually, I believe, and that would get submitted with those abutter.
If the permitting process is underway, then has the notification to abutters theoretically already happened?
Yes.
Yes.
Has anybody been notified?
No.
I can't speak as to what legally you might consider, but if you feel you have a case of not being notified as an abutter, I suggest you contact your state representative and state senator and ask them to look into the situation on your behalf.
Well, before you
That
get
would
there,
seem to me
have we
to be
received
something
a
to do.
copy? Have we received a copy of the,
Not for a comment, usually I get one in the mail saying that it's open for comment.
and we have not received that
I
yet?
haven't received any, we have not received anything.
Well, there
yet.
seemed to be an
Okay.
open question as to whether the proper procedures are being followed relative to public notification of the application.
Well, I don't know exactly when they filed it. I mean, I do have something similar that happened a few months ago, and its commenting period is just ending and actually ended today. But it's off a different one, but that was several months ago. Like I said, usually I'm notified by mail, and then we stick them up at the code office when it's open.
Rob, do you,
Yeah, in the package that the town received a copy of, we put in there the addresses and names of the direct abutters. Those who we are required to notify. We send out certified return receipt mail to all those abutters. In addition to that, we need to publicize this in a paper, a local paper that we're proposing in doing this project. That's the same with the planning board.
Right.
That's to let the people who are not direct abutters know about the project. Beyond that, we don't have to notify the entire town. We
no,
do
have
it-
you, has any of that been done?
But that's all been done.
That has been done.
Yeah, and in fact, the package there should have the copies of the receipts at the end of it.
Well, let's see who's been-
Not yours, but the DEP
Can
package.
you cite
Oh, the
where that
DEP
is in the
package.
report?
I didn't think I saw it.
Yeah,
So but we don't have the DEP package.
you have a copy of it.
Number 4.
The board doesn't, the town has a copy,
The town has a copy.
yes.
Just,
It's separate from the application that was
Right.
submitted to the town. It's a DEP NERPA application that a copy should have been delivered to the town.
by the applicant or by DEP?
I believe that's how we typically do it, is the applicant sends it to the town as part of the
Correct.
application.
So you've sent it to the town.
Yep, yep.
Scott?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it currently right here. If this is the current one,
That's the only
Yeah,
one we
that's
received.
December.
That's the only one
Yeah.
we received.
okay.
I would respectfully suggest that you folks get a copy of this and go through it and read the letters from the state and see if you have different opinions as to what some of their conclusions are on the application.
And where would we get that, sir?
Should be available
You
now.
have mine.
We,
But the copies.
let's not get the side conversations going, please. Let's just, I want to follow this through this one first, and then we can talk about other stuff. Scott, do you have the
I believe I have that here, yes.
and do you have the list of who's been notified?
That's what I'm trying to look for
Okay.
right now.
All right.
It's in a loose,
Okay,
just give me, yeah.
Just to clarify, is that the only DEP report?
Town only gets one copy of the DEP application typically.
But I mean, there's only one report that would be generated by DEP.
This is just the application that the applicant submitted to DEP. It's not DEP's conclusion on the application.
Which we don't have yet.
correct, correct.
That's a certification that says that we published it, and then the right butters,
Butters, okay,
and the return receipts.
okay. Yeah, because it was like Indian Point is sent to the association,
So who,
to the association,
so is that the list?
yes.
Would you pass it over to somebody from Indian Point and let them take a look at? Is there somebody like an officer from Indian Point by chance? Treasurer, perfect. Could you take a look at that, please, sir? And
Yeah, that, Scott Fox hasn't been around for ages. That's where it went. This is,
25 years.
this is an input, that's our address now.
well, did they come back?
No.
It's return receipt, right? Isn't that where you send them out certified or not returned?
Actually, he might be in jail too.
So we might have gotten it then.
Yeah, but if it's return receipt, it's gonna come back.
Right.
No, it's not returned, it's certified.
It's just certified.
Yeah, certified, sorry. And that's the address on the, as listed in the tax assessor site for the property owner. That's what we always go by.
Mm-hmm.
So who's at 6 Friar Lane?
That's where he used
That
to
was
live.
where he lived
That's where
30
he used
years
to live.
ago.
Who lives there now?
Scott Fox lived there 30.
Who lives there?
Fox has got a different address right now.
No, no.
No, who lives at 6?
Somebody is there though, right? That's six?
That's not an address we know.
Oh, it's not? Oh,
That's in Cumberland Center,
Oh,
or
yeah,
Falmouth or something.
yep, Cumberland.
okay.
I bill everybody, I know all the addresses, not by heart, but.
Well, that's what Scott Fox lived before he went to jail.
Did we ever have a sidewalk? No. On this project?
We didn't have a specific sidewalk. We just all know the marina. So you don't know the marina? Oh. I think we've all been there.
I don't know, maybe if I wasn't on the board then I
You
was
ever
off
there
for a
yet?
year.
I just have a question. Please be
Um,
aware that
One second, I will do that,
you're
I
not on a
promise.
microphone, it's not being recorded or broadcast.
Right, okay. That's why I didn't want all this start discussion, all right? All right, so next, have we got, where are we right now? You are,
I'm pretty much done with my comments and questions.
okay, Will,
I have a question, I guess, given that I don't do this all the time with this board. What is the board's process relative to DEP approvals? Some boards don't give final approval on a project until they actually receive the DEP approvals.
and recently that has been the way we have gone.
Okay,
We have
just-
waited for approval,
So
so.
I wanted to just make sure I
What if we
understood what that
disagree with an
process was.
approval? Do we have to approve anyway if the DEP approves, or if we have other grounds for refusal, then that's our right?
Right.
If you have other grounds for refusal, sure, you'd have to have those grounds in the ordinance, but yeah.
Well, in a way we do, because 1 through 5 of section
Right.
16D.
Yes, yes,
that
what
I
you- right,
cited,
yes, depending
yeah.
on those notifications. Okay, Rob, could I ask you to step down for a second?
Yes, sir.
I promised, so I'm gonna open up the public hearing one more time. This was gonna be a short meeting.
So again, Allison Sarna, from Indian Point, just a couple questions. If this is related to parking, does this plan, does it involve increased parking area? And does that move it closer to the wetlands to accommodate these additional spots? I have
No.
concern about that? No?
Yes and no, no, it does not.
Okay, so it's existing
Yes.
footprint. And then also, if these applications are public record, where can we find them? I've spent 3 hours trying to find things on the internet, and there was no information about any submissions for permits for this or the previous work. And just wanted to say we did not receive any certified mail.
Okay. Did you want to say, have something else to say?
I just wondered, Allison Allen, I wondered if St. Ebo's is in a butter,
Yes.
direct abutter, and were they notified? Do you know,
Yes.
do you know who was notified?
Let's see, is that number 10?
There was no one on that list that included us. That list you're asking for? There's no one on that list that was anything to do with us. None of us.
No, I'm looking at St. Ebo's.
St. Ebo's, on the other side.
I'm just wondering why Steve Mullen or Mary Lee or somebody's not here going, what the heck?
cannot hear.
No, that's all right. No, you're okay, Allison, you're all right. We'll get you, we'll get your answer.
Answer.
Yes, please.
Right. It was delivered to Ralph Bartholomew, P.O. Box 304, Raymond, Maine, under St. Ebo's Cove Incorporated.
Go ahead.
Box what now?
Box 304, Raymond, Maine.
Ron Giroux, 77 Indian Point Road. One question about parking. I remember before they had dry storage and before they were adding on the end, 60 years ago I used to go down there go fishing. And I never found a parking space down there because all the parking spaces on the left, they had dry boats on parked there. And if you go down in the summertime, you see they have all boats there. And the second question is, when Indian Point went after all their licenses, they had restrictions of horsepower on some of their slips. Are you people going to have put restrictions of horsepower on any
No,
of their slips?
We have no authorization to be able to put a horsepower restriction.
Not sure why they did it to us, but they did it to us.
Well, I can't say if the town did.
But it just seems like, I think the whole group ought to do a lot more homework before they just vote to pass this. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think we all gotta do a little bit more homework. Because
Thank
we're all a little bit in the dark. Thank you.
1 second.
Go ahead.
Okay. Alan Doherty, 19 Boaters Way. I'm asking the board to table this.
Hold the microphone.
I'm asking the board to table this and give us a chance to research. None of us were notified. So I just found out about it yesterday, you know. So I'm asking the planning board to table this for now and give us a chance to research and find out what our legal rights are and what have you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I am going to close the public hearing. I think we're covered.
I have a question.
Sure.
The documents that we have in our packet, are they public record?
Yes.
Then any member can go down to the town office and get a complete packet.
Well,
For their,
I would have to make copies and charge for them.
right.
I do not have extra copies to give out.
but you can print one, and if
And I would
the
have to charge
association
them
wants
for
to
it.
pay the printing fee or
Yes.
whatever, they could do so. I would rather retain my copy as a member of the
Well, we
planning
just gave
board,
it
but
away.
I think you should probably do that.
You just gave it away.
Took
Maybe
it back.
you didn't give it.
Yeah, but they have other means.
Bruce, how much do you want for it?
Just speaking only for myself, not to go into lengthy reiteration, but without a seasonal traffic study, without plans that show greater context of the surrounding area and their relation to the development, and without a planning board complete site walk, not only of this complete site, but some of the surrounding areas, so we can get a visual context of some of the concerns that have been raised. I can't vote for any continuation of the project at this point, just my 2 cents.
I would agree with
I
that.
agree with that too. I've never been down there. I'd like to have a site walk.
The first thing, if you do want a full packet, it would be beneficial to let Mary know like a day or two ahead of time, so she has time to run the copy off and put it together. Just don't show up at her front gate there and
Mary,
demand the copy.
On the CD you sent us, do we have the full packet?
Yes.
So I could give my copy away because I have the copy of the CD, and I can put that on my computer and I have no problem.
Yes, I scanned the entire thing in and
Okay.
put it on the CD.
I mean, it should be noted that they still can come down and take a look at it.
Oh, yeah, yes, you're certainly welcome to come down and look.
Is there a way to download it ourselves?
No.
No. All right.
I make
Robbie.
a motion to table.
Well, we have,
Or Mayor, if you want more discussion ahead of that, that's fine.
well, if we have other questions that need to get answers, then I think, I mean, I don't, do you have anything else that are you?
No, I think I voiced my concern.
I agree with Bruce. I need more context, definitely.
What about you guys on the other end?
Yeah, I'd like to see the status of the DEP permit and the application. If there's a comment period, we should be able to make comments. I think it would be important to understand the DEP permit in order to evaluate the first 5 conditions of the shoreline zoning provisions that are on our list here.
And I would agree with all comments that the board's made this evening about delaying this approval for the various reasons that have been stated.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have gotten to approval today anyway, but that's okay. Okay.
I'm good.
You're good. Visual, can we apply that?
How do you mean visual?
Well, you know how we,
content?
we talk about landscape, a house goes in, and it's gonna ruin the view.
I mean, I
of
think
the-
you're, the,
Number 5 does reference visual.
It does say, but I'm not but I
It's
mean, we
hard to
never.
quantify it,
Yeah, we've never had it in this context. But I'd be curious if the beach becomes a visual impact.
yeah, let me just,
Is the beach part of your property?
Yes.
It is.
Oh, cool.
I believe the beach relative to the nearest dock, the dock right now, the end of the dock that's existing that we're going off from, that's about 100 feet from our property corner, which is the joint property corner. And if you look at their plat, there's the retained area, which is now called the conservation area. It's about 70 feet to almost 80 feet from that point, from that corner, to the beach parcel. So it's a little bit more ways than 35 feet, but,
It's not
Right, yes.
so I think, I mean, based on your site plan review standards, the standards all kind of are related to landscaping.
Right.
Under shoreland zone, again, the shoreland zone standards, which I outline in item 3 of the technical review memo, really doesn't touch on that, so I think the place where that would come into play potentially is section 16D that Bruce read off, which are, there are 9 different standards there. I mean, the 5th one talks about conservation or will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland waters. And have to look at that a little bit more in terms of what there may be more in the ordinance, and I didn't bring my ordinance book with me, but in terms of what that actually says. I don't believe that, and Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you actually went through and addressed those in your application relative to the shoreland zone. You touched on the site plan review standards, but I don't believe you formally addressed the shoreland zone standards even though I kinda went down through them in my technical memo.
Okay. All right, before we move on, Rob, I owe David an answer on the fueling policy at the marina. Could someone speak to that, please?
Mike Susi, Port Harbor Marine, I
Thanks, Mike.
believe, I can check for sure, but I believe in their dockage contract, that's not allowed.
It's not allowed?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. So you all know what you need to do and what stuff you need to get? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to ask, how can we be sure we get our notice for the butters that's at the correct address?
If you get those addresses to, actually, it's not Mary, it's, who do they go? Caleb.
Assessor's office.
The assessment's office.
If they look at the tax bill?
You know, we should be on the phone, but you know, they're with the associations, and I know this firsthand, with the associations, they never, those two things don't mesh. So they have the town has a list of all the associations and contacts for those associations, and they have the tax bills, and they don't always jive, because I just know that I was for a long time president of our association, and I mean, I would get some of those things, and then I would not get, you know, when I was no longer president, it just kept on coming until you tell somebody to change. So you've got to do it.
We'll get that corrected.
Yep.
And the gentleman at St. Ebos has been dead for 20 years. 10 years.
Oh.
10 years.
Obituary. Again, unless we are told, we don't
Yeah.
know.
We'll get you that too, folks.
Okay.
We'll be in contact with them, working with them. We'll get that to you as well.
All right. All right, so I think we are in total agreement here, right?
I had another question, just
Yep.
as our jurisdiction in talking about this, with the safety, that bring up the point of having extra boats and stuff, has jurisdiction over water safety?
Well, it was,
Inland fisheries, I would guess.
yeah,
Sheriffs have a boat.
I would guess inland fisheries. I mean, certainly in the Coast Guard, that's,
I mean, they determine wakes.
Does
so
that
people
get
don't have a
addressed though?
harbor.
I mean, congestion of boats like that
I mean, I don't know what they use for their criteria as far as what they look at. I can't really answer that one because I don't know how they do it.
And I think that would be, and they brought that up, and I would think that would be a concern.
Well, I mean, that was part of theirs, that when they
But
reached out to them and
it's-
said that that's what they were.
It's not gonna be addressed as part of a NERPA application, though. I mean, the communication between DEP and inland fisheries or any of those agencies relative to the Natural Resource Protection Act is related to wetlands, fisheries, erosion, those types of things.
Can I speak, sir? Up there or right here?
no. Well,
Your choice. It's directly answering his question.
yes, go ahead.
Okay.
No, you have to go, yes, yeah.
sir. Okay, with regards to exactly what you just said, you're absolutely right. The sheriff's department who patrols the waters, they have nothing in bearing to do with what you have. Neither does the game warden service. But they can provide an affidavit to the DEP citing what their opinion is on what traffic situation this will cause, endangering boater safety. That's where it's relevant.
Well, thank you.
Our public safety has a boat that patrols, and I don't know, they may have, the fire department may have some input on that too. I don't know if they have any jurisdiction, but they definitely work with
Wayne?
public safety on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the comment or question?
The comment is wondering if the fire department has a boat that patrols the water for safety.
We don't go out on routine patrols. That always was the sheriff's department that went out on marine safety patrols. If our boat is out and we see issues, we'll definitely try to correct them, but we don't do an active patrol.
But you don't have any input on something like that that might cause you to have responses because of the congestion? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I don't know how I'd base that other than supposition.
Because you do on land, you do have.
Yeah, definitely. I got standards
And
that
if you
I
have to
can
get at
measure
somebody
things
out
by.
in the water and there's 20 boats there and you can't get at them, it's similar to being on land with congestion.
And what we were addressing with with regard to this project was the fire or life safety issues relative to the remoteness of those docks. But as far as being on the water, there's really not a standard that I have to measure that, where the game wardens, where the sheriff's department that's been out there doing patrols, they have some basis to make assessments. I mean, not trying to avoid
Oh, no, I
it,
just
it's
wonder,
just,
is this just a question of wondering? I mean, I wonder what they do down, you know, if you're down on the ocean and some of these big marinas, do they have standards for congestion of boats in the water coming into a slip?
and without having looked at that particular item, I'm sure there's standards for the design of the docks, the slips, how much space is required based on the size of boats that are going to be moored there. But I can't speak to that specifically right now.
I mean, it's not like there's a harbor master with traffic control or anything like that,
Right.
but
Yeah, that's usually where you get that kind of stuff from, is a harbor master, the game wardens,
Okay, back
police
to the-
agencies.
Back to the applicant. Rob, do you know what the board is looking for now? The information that we are, so that you,
HDP permit, 16B standards, adjacent properties, we'll do a bigger map. Trench detail and erosion control adjacent to the trench. Anything else?
no, I guess that's, right, I think that covers,
One more thing, Portland Water District.
yeah.
I've
Yes.
I've had meetings with the Portland Water District at this, prior to this. They expressed that they, as far as water quality, they did not have an issue with it, but if they felt that if we found something that would bother, but that we felt would bother us, that they would help us. But as they said, they had no concerns as far as the water quality.
Okay. Everyone all set then? All right, everyone knows where we're going. Okay, is there a motion?
I move we table.
Second.
Motion is to table the Port Harbor Holdings application. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. So, so it will come back up at the next meeting. Okay, so that if you are, and there will not be another public hearing. We only have one public hearing unless there is a major change to the project. So you will not get notified of this next meeting, right? But the next meeting will be, we will always meet the same time. It's the second Wednesday of the month, 7 o'clock, here we are. And you are welcome to attend. Now, I cannot guarantee that you will have a voice, but yes, you can hear what's going on, you can see the latest of what's been submitted. Okay, and then it'll be everyone. I'm sorry, David?
Do you have a larger building to accommodate 100+ people?
No, we locked the door after 20. You guys just made it in.
Is it all right if they're outside?
Yeah, yes, I mean, but honestly, everybody is certainly welcome to come. If there's going to be a huge crowd, you might want to let the town know ahead of time.
We'll do that.
But if there's 2 of you here or there's 100 of you here, it's going to basically proceed the same way.
We had 5 hours notice and this is what we collected. Give us a little bit of time, we can collect many more.
No, what I'm saying is, yes, you could, there could be 2 of you here or there could be 100 of you here.
Yeah.
The meeting will proceed in the same manner, whether or not you are here or not here, right? But, it would be nice, I think, if the board has questions, that there is somebody that could answer them.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
I have a question there. If the homeowners in the area file legal briefs or challenges to the project, would that be considered a major change to the project beyond which we would have to schedule another public hearing to discuss that? I don't know.
No, I think a major change to the project would be actually.
Would be from the
Yes.
applicant.
Right. Yes, sir.
So, we don't know, but what if the DEP, we don't have any more information from DEP? by the next meeting? Is that, you're gonna still hold that meeting?
We'll still hold the meeting because we're gonna have, it'll be actually be a public hearing for other projects, but we'll just continue to table the project. So we won't drag you down here.
Not just, I'm
I know.
not worried about me,
Yeah, that is a
just
good,
wanna make
right, that is a good question.
that clear
So,
for everybody.
for bringing everything in here, if there is nothing new, and the board, you know what the board is waiting on now. We're waiting on the DEP, we're waiting on the applicant to bring in the information that we asked for. If all of that stuff is not in, particularly the DEP, which the board will be waiting for, we will probably just wind up just tabling it and not doing anything, okay? It'll just stay on the table. If the information is all in, then we will be doing something. Yes, sir.
The gentleman to your right, Bruce, we listened to him bring up at least, I'm sorry. The gentleman to your left, my right. Here, he brought up at least, sorry, I didn't realize it was open to the public still.
It's not, but go ahead.
The gentleman to your left brought up between 5 and 7 issues with the initial paperwork that was presented on this project.
Yes.
Would you believe that that is a change enough to
No.
open it back up?
That's more an application of the ordinance to the application.
Okay.
A major change to the application would be they're changing the number of slips that they're asking for. They're changing, they're gonna level the building and build parking lot. They're gonna expand the building. A major change to the application itself.
Okay.
Not any major changes to,
For example, if the DEP required that they have 5 less slips in their plan,
No.
would that be, how many, sir, would be
well,
enough?
that is a board determining factor.
Could
So
you
it would be a
determine
vote.
that? Because we're in
Yes.
front of the board.
No, actually, we
No.
would, it would be that we would have to view the change. The board would take a vote to say, yes, this has been a major change. If the vote is yes, it's a major change, then the whole
Okay.
process starts
I
again.
understand. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Phew.
Where do we find the recording of this meeting?
Ah,
It's on the website, and it's also playing on, it'll be playing intermittently over the local channel. But it will be, I'll get it tonight and I'll put it on. I try to get it next day. So just go and you can see the link, go video archives, pick the, planning board, click on it, and it takes you right to YouTube. It's right there.
Can the board determine this evening, I didn't know anything about a beach, and I didn't know anything about proximity of the docks to that sort of issue. I would love to have a sidewalk.
yeah, we're gonna go down and look at the beach.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our next stop, next. So when, Saturday? In the snow? Well, can we get access to the beach?
Yeah, you can walk right in the park.
And so it's,
I'm there full time, right outside.
You can drive right in and park right in the yard in front of the gate.
Walk anytime you want.
Barry's house is right there.
would somebody, give Mary or Scott a contact point? Because if we do the sidewalk, well, when don't we decide the sidewalk? When would you like to go do it? We'd like to see the beach. You wanna do it this weekend?
Through the gate banger, right?
We'll have people.
Put the wrong beach.
Of course, we're gonna get 3 to 6 tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have it
So
plowed?
they're telling us the second Wednesday of next month, so.
No.
Can we get good visual context of the area from the beach?
Yes. No doubt
The
about it.
loon area and
Everything.
the whole thing.
You can walk right over to it.
Okay.
I have a,
Information, I'm there full time.
Thank you.
and this is what I wanted to drop off, we have that in situation of everything and a list of questions that we have.
Okay.
So do we leave that with?
Yes.
What time will the sidewalk be?
We haven't even gotten to the day yet, though, Rob.
Okay.
Do I hear any preferences? You wanna wait?
Saturday? This is kind of quick for Saturday, yeah.
You wanna go next Saturday?
That'd be better for me.
A week from this Saturday?
Yeah.
What time?
What time, about, well, it's 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 9? 9 o'clock a week from this Saturday. Whatever day that might be.
13th, 14th, 15th, it'd be the 22nd, right?
22nd?
22nd, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
22nd at 9 o'clock. And we're gonna meet where? At the beach?
There's a parking lot on 22 Indian Point if you're gonna use your GPS.
22 Indian Point.
It's not loud, so you,
Yeah, the parking lot.
There'll be ample parking.
There'll be ample parking, okay.
Can we just Google Indian Point Campground on Google Maps and we'll be able to find the beach right there?
Will there be refreshments and all that stuff there? Ice water? All right, so if somebody could be there.
I'll be there.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is that time and date okay with you?
9 o'clock.
On the 22nd? Yep. Okay, all right. We're done. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Will. Oh, yeah.
Somebody want this packet?
We have one packet available if you want it.
One packet. Auction.
Auction it off.
Well, you can sit where Will sits.
Yeah, exactly.
Get out of here.
We can't be pros
I was gonna say, that one-
by the ordinance, but you
Oh, you're welcome. You will indeed. You're welcome.
Okay, I'll have to have that in writing, please, because I don't remember everybody's. If I, so you need it in writing, I can't. You can call.
The best one?
And
I've had since I've been on.
That's almost like, it was that one we had a couple, 3 years ago?
Sure.
Rainbow Cake.
Sorry?
Parking lot down in Rainbow Cake,
Yeah.
3 or 4 years ago, it was just
Oh,
about
yeah.
like the Fry Island, similar.
Normally mediations back in the day, they don't do that anymore.
Is it Rachel? Is that?
Heard of it? Yep.
Here, you, Allison, you can have that. It's on there.
Okay.
You're welcome. Okay. Perfect.
A lot of concerns. I mean, I thought it was much.
Yeah.
Probably. Where we're from?
Yeah.
Although I think, as far as the ordinances go, we don't have, it doesn't look to me like we have a lot of say in anything that's in the water. Me too. So that's what you kind of feel bad about it. It's like the visual is if you're in the water looking back at the land, is what we have to think about, right, is the land part.
The irony is, we went through, when we were doing Fallout from Fry Island, a group actually came in here about boat launches.
Yeah.
And
Remember
it was
that?
all about public boat launches.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with private, because everybody says, no one will ever touch the private, we're all set there.
Yep. I remember that.
Did those go through? They just went through and they were for parking lot standards for boat launches, and I forgot which lake it was, but one of
It
those.
was great. It was on,
Oh, you're gonna hand these out?
Yes. There was
Or did you
discussion
already?
about State boat launch and
Yep.
a lot of concern,
Okay.
so. All right.
all right. Well, that was fun.
So
Are they
being
black
it's a
and
late
white or
hour,
color?
what I,
Okay. Okay.
did you give him that packet?
That's what she's giving them on now.
This is ordinance matter.
Make sure it's the same one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so the first question is, will we be ready to go for public hearing next week?
Well, we'll find out tonight. That's
Okay.
what, she didn't give him that one. She gave him this one.
Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right, so I'm handing out.
So this supplants the one that came with our packet,
Okay, Mary, I have
correct, Mary?
And
This
this-
one supplants
No, same day.
January 19th, January 29th. No, same day.
Same day.
Is it the same thing?
Well, you did a good job, all right?
Damn, I'm good.
I guess so.
Okay, well, this is.
Thank you,
This
Scott.
is the one you just gave me,
Yeah, I was gonna.
I
but
know.
it doesn't have all the red
Damn, I'm
stuff.
good, I had no idea.
Okay,
I
well,
can
I
have
have
this one. I'll keep this one.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
You got it right there?
okay.
This is a, what you're getting from me, Scott is handing out to you now, is kind of a summary of the articles as they could appear when we go to public hearing.
Okay.
And I didn't give it to you because it'll be a very large packet of the red line strikeouts and everything. And if you still have the summary sheet from the last meeting we had, which I had in red, I tried to follow that as closely as possible, but it may have drifted in and out. And I didn't put article numbers just because this will end up going to the town and they'll fill in the article numbers when we get to that point. But what we can do is just go through them as in the order that they're posted here. I think I need my glasses. Starting with the first one. which was the one for the open space, which was, Bob, the one that you kind of generated, which was the road connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have already gone through and we've worked that one through, but just briefly describing it, there's really 3 changes to Article 13A and 13B, which is the open space subdivisions in the land use ordinance. This is in the land use ordinance, not the subdivision ordinance, because that's where open space resides for some crazy reason. Would be a policy language change, and in that we have an article describing what the purposes of the road connectivity are, and then we also included some language in there talking about safety with regards to turning curves when adjoining lands or future right-of-ways, and offering, I said offering for possible road acceptance, because we wanted to make that statement that we're trying to promote that. However, it's not our jurisdiction to actually have the town accept those roads. So there's actually 3 changes to that first article. Second article that is on this list is the street standards, and these are with the state street standards as they relate to shoulders, and this also kind of came up through the road connectivity issue, but we put it under a separate article. In those roads, in lieu of doing sidewalks, we're going to do widened shoulders. And we address some of the grass shoulders and things like that. So that's what these 3 articles all deal with. And then the last one in there, the third item, is to deal with, talking with Nate, our pavement standards are grossly outdated as far as thicknesses based on changes to the DOT specifications. So that's to capture that in the same article. Next article, first one on the second page, has to deal with review criteria, and we put in the purpose, which is right in the front of the subdivision article, must be in compliance with the net residential area. In our process of looking through all these ordinances, it's really not clearly defined anywhere that all subdivisions must comply with the net residential area. So we put it right up front in the review criteria in Article 1 of the subdivision ordinance. So everybody goes through, knows right off the bat, you have to, for all subdivisions, you have to meet the net density requirement. So that's that change. That's a very simple one. Next one in the middle of the page is in the village residential. Has to deal with the one that Mike came up with helping us, that defines the densities, lot densities for single family, duplexes and multifamily. It was very confusingly written, and we've kind of clarified that. We broke it, instead of 3 sections, we broke it into 2, much clearer language. You've all previously reviewed that, so that's what that article would be for. The last one on page 2 is Greg's, which has to deal with making sure we've got timber harvesting as an allowed use in all the applicable zones, village residential, rural, and rural residential. Going on to the next page, that article would be accessory apartments, and that one has to deal with accessory apartments for coming off of one single family would not require a lot density calculation. And that language has already been before you and you've okayed that. The one in the middle of the page has to deal with fines, and in our regular in our regular ordinance, the language is a little bit outdated. And what we've been advised by our attorney is to use the same language that's in the shoreline zoning, supplement that, and put it in the regular land use, because the shoreline zoning ordinance is actually more current than the land use is on that point. So consistency, use the same language is eventually what we're doing there. The last one on page 2 has to do with the peddlers, and the 2 revisions we made on that is we've added mobile unit as to one of the peddlers' descriptions, and the other one was to on the licensing, which is you have to submit 30 days prior to a regularly monthly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting to have your license approved. The other one we did, oh sorry, there was 3 on that one. Previously, the peddler's license was for an area of 150 square feet. We just made it 200 square feet, which is the equivalent of 1 parking space. Makes some sense. The top one on page 3 is to deal with all the fire protection language. This one is a straight up, just really an update, right, Wayne?
Yeah.
As far as making sure the town is now utilizing NFPA 1 2018 edition. The previous was 15. Do we have any ordinance?
Yeah, yeah.
So all we're doing is just updating, because they've adapted the new NFPA. The second one is the one that you may have some more questions on. We may want to talk into more detail, but this is just how the warrant could be programmed at this point. And that is striking out 10,000 square foot threshold and adding 4,800 square foot or larger for requirement of sprinklers for residential structures. And then the other piece of that is they had some other language in there describing exemptions to that rule, which was all redlined at the previous workshop. The last one, again, very simple. For some reason in the ordinance, they had a very specific note on there that the Board of Appeals had to be on the last Monday of the month. Now it just basically gives them the authority to routinely schedule or annually schedule. And the last one also comes back to the street ordinance at this time, which will fall under the road design, which is if the applicant is going to use LiDAR, satellite, or aerial topographic imagery, we want at least 3 separate locations that are field verified by land survey. We've had some difficulties and some breaks in those. And the last one on that same item is there must be provided a site benchmark in accordance with NAVD datum, 88 datum, and have 3 property monuments tied to Main Street grid coordinates. That's to help with our GIS systems and to make sure we're all working on the same elevation datum. So those would be the changes. Now, going back to this other one, we still have some outstanding items that we can work through that I just haven't had time to finalize, and Scott's been waiting on the attorney. Those items are as follows: the sign ordinance, which I think when we get that language, it's just a matter of instituting it in. It's, Scott, you might have more.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, it's a result of a court decision that our sign ordinance is now not up to date, and it's just to bring it up to par with that court decision.
Is that like a freedom of speech?
Similar, like
Content,
something like that. Yeah,
something to do with
yeah.
content that's allowed on signs. And the other one is special events. And unfortunately, I just haven't had time, I was away, to get into that. And I know at the last meeting we had talked about it could turn into something more like a notification process, maybe more than a permit. I don't know if that's anything, if it's not an ordinance, just a notification, do we want to take that up, or do we just want to send that to the Board of Selectmen as a policy? I don't know. We kind of fall into a gray zone, and I know we've looked at a few towns that have it. Cumberland is the one that has the farm barn event ordinance, and then I think I gave you Kennybunk or Kennebunkport's, which was, had a lot of stuff in it, but it was kind of relevant stuff. We can go back, we can massage that one if you think that's one that you like. I just think that with some of the conversations we've had recently, or emails and things with barn events, that this one may need some more time to be worked on, personally. I don't know.
One of the things that Phil Sausher had mentioned is that you could do a special event, but you could cut out and explicitly prohibit wedding venues at a barn mass gathering in the structure like a barn. You can weed those out and still have this special permit, so you don't, because basically what we were concerned about is if we had this special event permit, they could, even though it's prohibited, but they could, in certain zones, but they could do a wedding venue, a one-time thing, and he said that you could have the ability to prohibit that as that would not fall under the special event.
I think there's kind of a white elephant in the room, which is barn events and then every other event. and barn events are obviously something that all towns are kind of, I'm not gonna say struggling with, but they're new. And I think concerns are starting to grow from them, the impacts that they have on residential neighborhoods, because typically they're in farm or residential neighborhoods, and depending on the size and the scope and routine event that could be happening monthly or weekly, all factors into how people coexist and live with it.
I got a suggestion. When we talked about this before and you'd given us samples from, I think, 3 different towns, Some of those samples were very specific as far as size, number of people, parking, and others were just so vague they were almost anything goes.
Right.
What I would suggest is almost like a design build scope of work where you're proposing something to a client. Put your heads together and think about what really sounds right for Raymond, and come up with maybe 2 different approaches as far as specificity.
Yeah,
Okay.
numbers or a range
Yeah,
of
and
numbers.
then let us look them over with you and kind of see which direction makes the more sense by laying those 2, you know, competing proposals that you come up with side by side. And then we can kind of choose what path to go down.
And I think that may be something that we can do, but I think we're starting to get up against the deadline of time crunch here. I mean, we'll have next month where I think the ones that I've laid out in a warrant, we can clearly have a public hearing on those. These other ones may.
They may slide
They
till
may
next
slide,
year.
or we may have to do it on one in April, just before Board of Selectmen meets.
But we don't have a real issue yet, when we're trying
No.
to stay on the front
Exactly,
of the line.
exactly.
So.
If it's on the back burner, that's not a huge deal.
That's what I'm saying, maybe
I
we.
think it might be better just to leave it on the back burner and work on it, get the specifics that we
Right.
wanna put in it, and rather than rush it through and wind up
That's,
something.
that's kind of where I was coming
Yeah.
from. I don't think we have any applications forth, right?
No, I mean, it would be, the only thing we're kind of trying to gather is sometimes when they have these,
Party
well,
with a band and they invite people in
Yeah.
and charge them money, you know, that's.
Is that happening
that's-
now?
That's a
well,
not that, no,
well,
no,
there's kind of
that's
one
getting
that
our foot out in
reoccurs
front.
on a yearly basis that he has, but, that's the only one that I'm aware of that would probably qualify for what we're doing or looking at.
But to your point, I think we'd be better off doing a little bit more in-depth research. All the towns are just starting to get into it, and they all do what we do. They get into it and they're like going, ooh.
Yeah.
I don't know, because you can get into really, like, to your
I'd
point,
rather
really
take more
refine
time and get
specific.
it right.
Yeah, more, and I guess we should really find out what the numbers are that trigger these issues. You know, is
Right.
it 50, is it 100, is it 250?
And what our objective is.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I think what's pretty clear what our objectives are. We're looking out for the environment, we're looking out for the sanity of the neighbors with noise and hours of operation, parking, wastewater, those are all the typical things, but how do we approach it so it doesn't become so cumbersome that anyone that just wants to have a once-a-year wedding can do it and not be overburdened with it, but then again, enough so that neighbors are protected from somebody who does want to maybe have a routine venue.
And we don't want to pass unenforceable, worthless ordinances.
Right.
You know,
Well, Greg does.
we have enough of those.
Some say.
So with that said, you know, I mean, I kind of went through these relatively quick, but do you have any objections, any comments, any concerns with what we've gone through? I mean, you'll have some time. What we'll do is we'll post this article, and with it, we'll do the strikeouts and the actual ordinance language for each one of these. So it'll be a relatively, just because of the way the ordinance is done, it could be a relatively thick packet, and that's why
Right.
I only want to do it once. I guess what we'd look for tonight would be if you're comfortable with the way the article language is set up. Are there any you want to combine under one article or vice versa? We just need to know whether you're comfortable with us posting it for public hearing.
I think there's one more we could add, though, it was what came out of the zoning board of appeals. If we could, I mean, that's just a verbiage change.
So we can add that to the one that we've already got the verbiage
Right,
changed to, if it's that
yes.
simple.
Yeah,
What
it
was
is.
that one?
It was whether or not construction, was it back where construction, if the expansion in the waterfront was applicable for new construction as well as
Existing.
existing, thank you.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't specific, and if you just reading it, you could see it could apply both ways. I mean, it's
So-
obvious, it's obvious what it is for.
And so did the
But-
Board of Appeals make a determination as far as where they wanted that to go, or what is it you want us to do with that?
I want you just to add to clean it up by make it existing structures.
Okay,
And I think that's all that has to be added.
just
is
existing,
structures.
okay, gotcha.
Is that for what qualifies for setback variance?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I may do is I may actually give these, just so we have some sanity with it, again, because I don't know where these articles end up in the whole overall town vote when it comes time for article numbering. But I may just put a temporary number on these for the public hearing, so when you go through it.
Yes, that
Or
would be
maybe I'll
nice.
put a letter to it, because the town puts a number, maybe I'll put A, B, C, or
Okay.
something like that. Just so that when you're going through it with the public hearing, you'll be able to follow each one instead of like this.
One of the things that didn't mention is that I did approach the selectmen as far as the change in the business license ordinances, as far as how they would look at it. One of the things that they kind of threw back as to one of the things that they might be interested in is you come in, it's a one-time permit, but yet it's automatically reviewed every year. That way they don't have to, if they choose not to renew it that next year, they can without having, you don't have to resubmit a permit every year.
That makes sense.
And that way it also come back, if they have any, if the fire department has any issues with that, that could come into that renewal process that we could catch every year, and get them up to date, or at least keep them on their plan of correction.
So is that an ordinance change or a license change?
Should be, well, where right now we have no ordinance.
Right.
So,
It would just be a license
Well-
change. Change the license policy, wouldn't it? I'm just wondering, is it that something that this board will handle, or is this actually something the Board of Selectmen will handle directly? Because we don't have an ordinance for that.
We have no
at this
ordinance
point.
on license.
And you're not responsible for policy.
no, I'm just trying to think how other towns it is written up in the land use ordinance, but
It'd be a strange place for a business, I would think.
But well, it just goes down to that it has to be
Except for-
reviewed and.
yeah.
And that's kind of what basically what I'm asking is, this is what they're saying to you, and what happens is I'm going back to the town attorney with some guidance, because he wanted to know too exactly how they wanted it, which way you guys wanted to go, and he's going to be working on that ordinance itself.
I would say if the selectmen want renewal, I don't think we have objection.
Okay.
Would we, any of us?
That may be one like the sign
Yeah.
language that we just need assistance from the town's attorney to
Yeah,
piece together.
Right.
And if they have it in, because we have to notify, I think for a public hearing, 15 days under the ordinance. I think it's 15 calendar days prior to the public hearing, we have to have public notice of it.
Is it 15 or 30?
I saw in a document at the town today, I think it was 15, but
Okay.
it may have been antiquated, I don't know, but.
One of the other things was brought up, but they were deciding whether or not it would still be issued, would it go in front of the selectmen, or would it go in front of the town clerk? Don Willard, the town manager, expressed concern that it not go in front of the selectmen, that it be basically through the town clerk. And if by any reason that we feel that they're in violation or something and we deny it, they have the ability to appeal to the selectmen.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So from a timing perspective, if we go to public hearing next meeting and, we have any kind of public retort or anything like that, we may have to have maybe a special meeting in between. I don't know what the Board of Selectmen, typically around April, they start preparing those warrants. So,
I don't think we're gonna have anything of major.
yeah, I
Do you?
don't expect either, especially if we kind of push back the special events. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think that would be the only one that may or may not, anybody may have any interest in. I think the rest of these are relatively clean up and there's a couple policy changes, but I don't think they have any major wild implications on any persons or project at this point,
No.
so.
Sprinklers might.
Sprinklers.
Sprinklers might,
Yeah,
sprinklers.
as a matter of
But
fact,
again,
you're
if
right.
we do, if we do and we decide we wanna, if it's something we can clean up relatively quickly, we may have to have a special meeting, or we may have to just kind of push it through in April quickly and flip it to the Board of Selectmen.
Right. Let's go to sprinklers, because I think a lot of people have questions. Go ahead.
Article, whatever that is, IX.
building additions? Well, I was looking at this, and I have a barn, and it's about 4,400 square feet.
Good question.
And if I built it so that I could put a roof on either side, like a lean-to. And if I put a lean-to on one side and it's 12 feet wide and 60 feet long, it puts me well over 4,800 feet. So does that mean I put a sprinkler system in my barn, which has no power, no?
No,
I just don't see how it's clear that I don't have to do that in here.
it is in a different section of the fire
Is it because it's
protection.
taken out and there are other parts that apply? I mean, the structure of the ordinance, 'cause it's.
Well, is your barn a residential structure? Your barn's not residential.
Residential.
You're not you don't have it for occupancy for
Yeah,
residents.
Well, there's nothing before this that says it's residential.
The current fire protection ordinance addresses that concern that you're asking about, in that agricultural type buildings even if they meet the size requirement, don't have to be sprinkler. And we already have that in our ordinance. That's a separate standalone section in the fire protection ordinance.
That brings up a good point, though. Does this applies to all, and do we need to be specific
It
about?
says any and all structures.
It does say all areas of new buildings. Should that be commercial and residential, or?
Yeah, we can clean that up.
Because I think that might address your point. If it's a storage facility or you know, or something that somebody's using for garage, then
It's right in the center.
Store junk.
it's private.
That's
what I do.
Third page, second. And what about the 480 square feet? Are we okay? Is that, something came up on discussion on that?
Well, they just cleared it up a little bit. There was confusion as to originally if other towns had it for residential. And there's just a little bit of confusion on that, which, well, Wayne can probably do a better job than I can as far as explaining it, so.
Right. The 4,800 square feet mostly comes from either NFPA 1 or from the ISO. And specifically when we talk about the Insurance Services Office, ISO, they use the 4,800 square feet as, once you reach that threshold, then you have to start meeting commercial fire flow rates to be able to protect that structure. So that's where the 4,800 comes in. And the confusion probably came in at the last meeting where I talked about surrounding towns having the 4,000 square foot tripping mechanism. But I did mention that as far as residential 1 and 2 family dwellings, this would be new territory other than Gorham and Portland.
Bruce, you just here for moral support, or?
Yes.
If I trip up, he's got
Teamwork.
Well, and I guess my thought would be is at what point, you know, we're only missing 0 to 4,800 for all structures at some point, and is that the way the future is going to be headed, or?
Why don't we make it retroactive to all houses, see how that goes over at the town meeting?
But the issue that brought this up is, like we discussed at last meeting, these large buildings that we just physically can't bring enough water and deliver it at the proper rate for those types of fires. So that's why we're looking at this for the larger residential structures. There's been no discussion amongst us on the fire department of all 1 and 2 family homes in Raymond. We want to just deal with the ones that we know that are a problem for us.
But we did talk about whether or not we could put in fire boundaries inside the structure?
Right, and that was added in for language.
That was added in, okay.
Yeah, I think you got it in 2-hour firewall rated exemptions for 1 and 2 family buildings or structures. Right, on page 2 of that.
All right.
So So they have some flexibility there, because I think you had discussed that if they put a fire-rated wall up there, then can you expand an existing structure and avoid the sprinkler? I think was the example you would use, say you were at, kinda like what Greg's up against, but if you had a 4,600 square foot home and you put another room on, you know, and you trip the 4,800, you know, but you can put a firewall rated between the two structures and.
So, Jim, in your last memo,
Yep.
we're dropping out item 9, special events licensing.
Yes.
We're dropping out item 11, business licensing.
Business and licensing was the one that we were just talking about with Scott.
So we're gonna keep that in. We're
I
gonna-
guess we gotta kinda hear from the town's attorney on that one.
Okay, so that's an if. All right. And
I thought that's pretty well written.
We've captured everything
we
else.
captured everything else.
Yep.
Okay.
So I mean, that leaves us with, 10 or 11, or actually 12. Oh, and the one that I did wanna discuss, which we actually already have in our ordinance, PDF and electronic versions. It's in the site plan ordinance, and I didn't give it to you here, but it's not in the subdivision. So I can draft up some language and make sure that applies to subdivision as well as site plan. I can use the same
Same
language, so I can
Okay.
easily do that as well. And again, I think for a situation like you have tonight, we're all thankful that, we do get electronic versions, because it can save us all a lot of grief when a butters come in looking for something. If that information is available via PDF, it's easy to
find.
easy to send.
I have a question. 35 feet or more in height, does that include the height of a buried basement? I would think it would, because that's also part of the total volume of the
Oh, you're talking
building.
about the fire code?
That's grade, from grade.
From grade, okay.
We want to
Say
clarify.
that's how it's-
Should we
that's how it's-
stipulate
that's
that
how
in
it's written.
language in here?
And do you guys use the same thing as like, 'cause I know some towns, I don't know how you do it, Scott, but they use a mean grade too. Because if you have
yes.
one end of the house is here and the other's here,
Yeah,
you use a
yeah,
mean
yeah,
grade.
State mean and the
Maybe we want
definition
to
of
refer to
height of
that,
structure.
to the mean grade.
Yeah.
Understand that 35 feet is existing, it's already in the ordinance. Do you want us to try to clean that up, or how we would apply that is either grade or the mean grade if we're looking at two
Well,
different
yeah,
grades?
yeah.
I think it should be consistent with.
That's
what-
our guiding principle.
I mean, I think it should be consistent with however you, the building height, you regulate the building height.
Yeah, that's how it's, I had to look at the definition exactly
I
how
think
it's
if you get into
worded.
two different interpretations, you're just getting into
Well,
something.
because shoreland's different. Shoreland's measured from, height is measured from the lakeside.
Yeah.
Mean grade, not from.
Is it really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that. From the lakeside, the lake,
Yep.
that's a changing level.
Well, they don't, yeah, I mean, that's how they measure it. It just says from the downhill, well, it says downhill lakeside of the structure.
It's the ground level. It's just on the lake side of the building.
Oh, I get
Yeah,
it. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I thought you were talking
Not the
about-
Just
height
be,
of the
just
model.
because, no.
Okay, word.
If you're on a cliff, that's not a good grade.
Or it could be uphill.
All right, what else? Everybody happy?
So you want us to schedule for a
Let's do it.
hearing
Do a
on
public hearing next meeting.
March 10th, did I hear? Something like that? Whatever the next meeting date is, we'll make sure. We'll have to figure out how we want to do the notifications for those, because you got all these ordinances. I don't know how we've done it in the past, have we just done it as one block, or have we actually labeled out each ordinance that we're changing?
Okay, we don't put that in the public notice.
Okay, that's why I was just curious.
Yeah,
We just say we're public ordinance revisions, public hearing.
no. And we're
Post it
also-
online.
The Roadrunner newsletter, we'll
Yeah.
have it in that.
And just say that they're available at,
So what I'll do is then I will scan, once we get all the red lines and everything, I'll scan it so that you can post it.
That'll be great.
So you have a PDF of it.
So, March 11th
March 11th.
is our public hearing. good meeting. All right, everybody okay? Ready to go?
I have one other item.
Ooh, just in time.
Just in the nick of time. Findings of fact for the lot 4A that we did for the other Dustin lot down there. We need to sign the findings of fact, so I'll just hand those out. You quickly can read through it. Need one copy that needs to be signed. And that was one that was done. Bob, you abstained from that vote?
Yes.
Had that in the record, and I actually labeled it on there, but I think
Okay.
everybody else voted on that. This was going back to October. Unfortunately, I was out, so.
So I should not sign, right? Or should I sign?
You don't need to sign.
I don't need to
You
sign.
abstain from the vote, I would recommend that you.
Yeah, you have it there.
We have enough board members here to make it viable, so.
This? I don't even have one.
When you get done with those, send some back.
supposed to sign here?
Say again?
Can you send one back, so, you should have had enough here, but.
You probably,
Still, there's one here.
there's an extra one here.
I referred to your memo.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
Okay, just referred to it,
Yep.
okay.
So everything,
Very good,
all
thanks.
those conditions that were in your memo would be part of that.
Very good.
Why don't we pass this one back all the way down to Mike and let him sign it, and then they can pass this way. Those that need to sign, can sign. So Jim, you were here for most of that discussion on our previous,
Yes.
the Marina meeting. So the planning board really has no input into the DEP.
The town can, you get notified just like in the butter.
Right.
So the town officials can comment to the DEP.
The town officials, mean it being,
Code enforcement officer, engineer, whomever,
Okay.
will, on behalf of the town, because I've done this for other towns that
Right.
get applications, and they'll sometimes say, can you take a look at it, see if anything there, make a comment to DEP, and I have in the past in other towns, on behalf of the town, saying, you know, the town has a concern about X, Y, Z, or is there any way you can include this concern? And they may or may not, depending on their jurisdiction. If it's something that's in their jurisdiction, they'll say, okay, we'll go back and take a closer look at that.
so procedurally, somewhere along the line, the town should get something from DEP concerning this, or has we already got it?
The application you received, that Scott received from the
Right.
applicant, is really your first notification that it's time to comment.
So we should be sending something.
You should, if the town or Scott or Will, on behalf of the town, has concerns,
Right.
they should be addressing those to the DEP, because as Rob said, they're in the process of finalizing that.
Okay.
And I don't know what the exact window of comments, if it's come and gone, but it can't hurt to still send it. You know, typically, you have a window of opportunity from the time the town receives it. And that's sometimes a disconnect, because sometimes these notifications in towns go to the clerk. Maybe don't go to the code enforcement. The clerk may have it, probably sends it over to Scott, but, you know, in the shuffle of paperwork and everything.
Okay.
That's just how the notification process works. But there is a time frame, and I can't remember if it's 30 days or something like that, that typically you have a review period that you can make comments to DEP.
Okay, so does that have, so the response back should be a detailed response as to what our concerns are?
Yeah, I mean, it can be general, it can be anything. I mean, it just be any correspondence you want to have with the DEP, any concerns you can raise, you can send them to the analyst of the DEP.
And at the same time requesting a public hearing?
I'm not sure which permit they were doing. Some of them, like if you do a site location, you have to hold your own public hearing outside of the town. For NRPA, I don't think you have to. I think the town's process is enough. But I think the process you guys, where you handle it was that you want that DEP approval before you make any decision. And to your point, just because you have the DEP order does not mean the town has to approve it. They're looking at it from a different criteria than the town. In some cases. Some cases they're the same.
But what authority would we have to go against the DEP approval?
Following your ordinances.
Following the ordinances?
Right, your ordinances.
Okay, 1 through.
1 through
16.
whatever,
Okay.
whatever those are in the shoreline zone, whatever.
Okay, so now, do you need something, so who's gonna send this back to DEP? And who is,
I mean,
what
you
is going to
can
be?
either authorize, I mean, like I said, I work in other towns, it can be either the consulting engineer, or it can be the code enforcement officer, it can be anybody. I mean, the town is like in a butter to this thing. It has a right to comment.
So the planning board can authorize you to?
Not me in this case, I have a conflict. But, I mean, no, but it'd be Will in this case. It would be Will.
Oh, it'd be Will?
Will has to.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
Yes.
Okay. So is that, what do you think, Scott? Is that do you want to do it, or should we authorize Will?
Yeah.
Will do it?
Or you can do it, I mean, way I usually do it in other towns, I correspond with a code enforcement officer, and usually the code enforcement says, well, I think these are some items, you know, you look at them from a technical standpoint, you're more technically savvy than me.
Right.
Look at them, and if you think it's worth it, send the comments, correspond me into it, and send it to the DEP. And that can be via email, it can be in writing.
So I think it'd probably be better if Will
It
actually
absolutely
did
should
it.
be Will. In this case, he's representing
Right.
you as a board.
And he can liaison with Scott to find
Yes.
out that.
Yep.
Okay, so does that sound?
The only question I have, does DEP then, are they required to send us their response?
In the case that I've had, they have corresponded back that they received the comments, and then they'll either tell you whether, you know, any action that they may go forward with that. I don't know. In the case that I had, they actually incorporated one of the comments, and the other one said they was already addressed. So it's a case-by-case basis, basically, is all I can tell you with that.
Okay.
And as far as the other question you had, as far as jurisdiction on the water rights themselves, that is really quite interesting, because, I mean, if you were on the coast, it would be the harbor master or the Coast Guard.
The Coast Guard, right.
Or navigable waters.
Yep.
I don't know, I assume it'd be the sheriff department, probably warden service. Again, we kind of jokingly talked about it, but the town does have somebody who's designated as a harbor master, which might be Dawn in this case. So, I mean, but, you know, he's not out there patrolling on a
Right.
regular basis, so you're probably gonna look at the entity, which would probably be the sheriff department. I don't think anybody else would have any, there's no Coast Guard or anything like that on the Sebago Lake, so.
No, and I would beat down.
I think it's gonna be between the warden service and the sheriff department as far as,
Traffic.
water safety.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones that enforcement. If you go out, and you don't have your life jackets, it's the sheriff, although usually it's the warden service that's looking at safety on the water.
Send the
Okay.
ferry boat over there.
Yeah.
Check it out.
So
All right, so I will make a motion that we direct Will, acting on behalf of the town, through liaison with Scott, sends a notice in response to the DEP application stating the board's concerns with the application. And those concerns, I mean, you've got them, right? I know, so Will taking notes. It would be the environmental impact, and it would be the,
As I say, could they
Shoreline
send an
zoning
email
1
to
through
me?
5.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
I don't know, I mean, you have to call the DEP, see who's been assigned to the project. Like Christine Woodruff did the other one. She may be assigned to this one. She usually doesn't by region. I don't know. Usually what happens, the DEP assigns an analyst for the project, and usually it's on a regional basis,
Oh,
so.
it's be Alexis.
Could be,
Alexis.
yeah, it could be Alexis too, if it's an NRPA.
Yep.
So you find out who that person is, and you can usually email them directly your concerns.
Okay.
And the town's weight is pretty heavy.
All right, that sounds, you guys okay with that?
Yep.
Is there a second?
Signing
Yeah, I'll
for the
second that.
October
Second, any other
7th,
discussion?
16th.
All those in favor? All right, anyone opposed? So Scott, can we ask you to make that contact with Will?
Yep.
All right.
And as
Jim
far as
would
the
know,
notification
he would.
process goes, having been in those shoes before, the applicant in that case can only go what's on record.
Oh, yeah, I
You know,
mean, that's-
And to your point, I mean, I feel bad, they say, oh, he's deceased, he's in jail, but to your point, they haven't changed the
Yeah. Right.
tax, the tax assessor, so that's what's on record, so, you know, as much as they're upset, obviously if they get the next round, they'll have to be notified, but,
Well, they got here for the public hearing, right?
right.
Well, one person, I guess, did get the notice. It's a good thing they all didn't get notice. All right,
Do we have any other
Still on
applications?
there.
We don't have, at this point, we don't
is
really
there a
have.
motion to adjourn?
I'm just gonna give you a quick update before you do that.
Did you already do that?
I did, but I was
This
just,
is
I don't
the
think we,
second-
I don't think we have any other applications, what I was gonna tell you.
Oh.
Runs is still on the.
We've got the subdivision we did the site walk on, which is, we're still waiting, and then the only other one would be Aroma Joe's, and both of those are, we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, Roman Joe's is like on a hot.
Yeah, we had the
had
traffic
that.
movement permit back in November.
And then they just died.
And then it's just kind of been sitting status, and I think it came down to maybe some of the construction issues with the water line or something.
Well, that and being the time, he didn't wanna deal with it in the wintertime, they
Yeah.
felt it wasn't
Oh.
more.
So, you know,
Okay.
it'll come sometime. So,
All right.
that's all I got.
You sure?
I'm done.
There already motion, there's a motion. Second, all those in favor?
I'm done ski.
Done. Thank you, guys.
All right.